I'm going to talk about the Labos 1point5 initiative, which is something we started together with Tamara Benari, who is an environmental scientist in France, about 2 years ago. So this is a very quick introduction of the context. And I want to insist perhaps on something specific, which is that in the last couple of years, maybe you'll agree with this, that something has changed in terms of how we perceive climate change, is that it's not anymore only in the scientific articles or in the news, but it's really, we can feel the climate change. We can make a physical experience of climate change. And of course, the current events in North America illustrate this, I think, very well. And this is something that has really changed in the last couple of years for many of us. And there are a number of scientists over the world, a number of astronomers in particular, who really feel that they cannot continue business as usual. They cannot continue and have the same practices in doing their job as they have had for the last decades. So what we did in France, so that was in March 2019, together with a number of colleagues from different disciplines, is published an open letter in the national newspaper Le Monde. And this paper was entitled, In Face of Climate Emergency, Scientists Must Reduce Their Environmental Impact. And attached to this open letter was a website and the creation of the Labos 1point5 initiative. And so quite quickly, we gathered a large number of scientists. And today we are about 600 scientists from all fields of research, really all fields from humanities to fundamental science or mathematics. And these people are spread in different teams. I'm not going to describe all the details, but there are 6 teams in this project, and it's coordinated by a small core team of 10 scientists. So I'm going to describe what we've been doing in the last couple of years. The first thing we did is create an open source tool to assess the carbon footprint of research. And so the goal was first to provide a tool for research labs to measure their footprint by their own. So the idea was not to give a calculator for individual, but to make a measurement at the scale of a research lab. And together with that, because in France, research is really organized with research labs. It's not like in the Anglo-Saxon world where you have universities. In France, we have really individual research labs spread over the country. And by providing this tool to all the research labs, it's also a way to centralize the data and provide an estimate of the national footprint of the entire sector of research from this database by collecting from all the labs in France the carbon footprints. So to do that, Odile Blanchard and Jérôme Mariette, so Odile is an economist and Jérôme is a computer scientist, defined a common protocol for the measurement of the carbon footprint of research labs. And there are 3 versions of this protocol and perimeter. And the first version, which is out now, includes buildings, so electricity, heating, fluids, and travel, so professional travel and commuting to go from home to the office. The second version of this protocol will include numeric footprint and purchases. And the third perimeter, which will be out in 2022, will include also research infrastructure. So the cost in terms of emission of the use of, for instance, a telescope, a particle accelerator, and this type of infrastructures. So the tool looks like this. It's an online tool. This is the current version, which is in French, but we are developing a version in English. And we will try to internationalize this tool. And basically, you enter a number of information that you can, in principle, get from the directors of your institute or your research lab, if they are nice. and willing. And then as an output, you get the distribution of the emissions in function of the different sources, buildings, so the commuting, etc. And you can look at this with a graphical point of view. All this is described in a preprint, so it's a paper we submitted to a scientific journal, and it's on a bioarchive already with all the details. So we have some preliminary results with the use of this tool. The first thing is that this tool, which is called GES 1.5, so GES is a greenhouse gas acronym in French, GES 1.5 has been recommended by the CNRS to the 1,000 research labs that exist in France. So this is a strong support from CNRS in terms of logistics, and they've also helped us to make their accountancy tools compatible with the GES 1.5 tool. So this is also very useful. And so currently more than 200 research labs in France are engaged in doing this measurement of their carbon footprint, and 30 of them have completed the measurement of their footprint. We started about 6 months ago, so it's growing, and we expect to have lots of measurements in the coming years. So these are the preliminary results for what we have. It's only 27 labs. And what you see here is the raw emissions in kilograms. And you see what dominates is the commute, so going from the institute to home. The heating is a large source of emission, an important source of emission, and professional travel. All these three, which dominate, are about at the same order of magnitude. But I want to insist that the preliminary work, this is preliminary, and what we estimate, and some people have estimated from the purchases, is that purchases is also a large fraction, which will be comparable to these sources of emission. Okay, so once you do the measurement, that's the first step, but then you want to reduce. And so we launched a project that we call the experimentation. And this is coordinated by these two people, Audrey Sabat and Olivier Berné. And the idea is to support the creation of mitigation scenarios in research labs. So for now, we have a pilot project with 17 labs, and what they will do is they will do the measurement with this tool, GES 1.5, and then they will discuss the ways to mitigate, to reduce their carbon footprint, either by using quotas, taxes, or other incitative methods, and they will discuss together, share the information. And this whole process has a financial support from the CNRS, so the National Research Center in France. And the idea is that this scales up to the largest possible number of research labs in 2022. As I said, there are more than 1,000 research labs in France. And that this way we can really have, after the measurement, the mitigation of the reduction of the carbon footprints. Another important aspect that we developed in the last couple of years is sociological and ethnographical surveys in the scientific community. So we conducted, and this was coordinated by Milan Boucher-Valla, who is a sociologist, an online sociological survey amongst the 130,000 members of the academia in France. We selected randomly 30,000 people to whom we sent the survey online, and we got about 7,000 answers. So that's a 25% response rate, which is something that you get usually for this kind of, typically for this kind of sociological surveys. And you see the distribution of disciplines of the respondents. So you see that we have a coverage of pretty much all disciplines. And in parallel to this quantitative methods for sociology, we also have a more ethnographical approach. And this is part of the PhD of Antoine Hardy, who is conducting, really, he goes to research labs and he conducts semi-supervised interviews of researchers and scientists to understand what their practices are, to really understand the social conditions in which we produce knowledge in academia and how this relates to CO2 emissions. I don't have the time to describe all the results of this sociological approach, but I'm going to give you an example of analysis that we can do with this type of data. So here is a question that we asked to the scientists is whether they think climate emergency imposes profound changes in our professional practices. And what you see here is that most people, so that's above 90%, agree that really we need to do something, that it's important to change the way we work. You can see here that this is something we had already seen in preliminary surveys that we conducted, because before we did the big survey, we did some preliminary survey in different communities, and really in all communities, including astrophysics, this is something that is really pregnant in the community. People think we need to change. Now, if you ask them whether they changed or not, for instance, if in 2019, they have postponed or canceled a business trip for environmental considerations, what you see here is that most people answer no. And so in a way, what you can say is that there is a form of contradiction. On one side, people say that it's important really that we change our practices, but when you ask them if they actually did change their practices, well, the answer is rather no. So there is an apparent contradiction, and there are risks related to this contradiction. And this is the example of a newspaper article in a quite conservative newspaper in France, which whose title is researchers who fly the most are climate scientists. And you see here what's at stake. I mean, there is a message, an underlying message here, which is, well, you know, climate scientists tell us that there's climate change, but, you know, they're flying all the time. So should we believe them? So there's something I think that is a bit dangerous behind here. The question for us here is, why are people in academia not changing their practices? I mean, why is this taking so much time? Although they know about the dangers and although they say that we need to change our practices. We want to address this question with the tools of social science and statistics. And so what we use is core concepts of what is called field theory in sociology. And to do that, we consider this theoretical framework. Actually, field theory comes from, was imported by sociology from physics. And so what we consider is that academia is a global field of what is called a global field of power, where the social agents, here the members of the academic field, compete to obtain various forms of capital. And capital in the field of academia is constituted by, for instance, publications, citation, prizes, grants, funding, etc. This is the kind of capital you can obtain through competition inside the academic field of power. And if the obtention of this capital requires to spend CO2, then agents will naturally spend CO2. If to win in the competition you need to spend CO2, then, you know, people will just spend CO2. So the question can be rephrased as whether the obtention of this capital in the academic field is associated with emission of CO2. It is difficult to measure all the capital in the field of academia in a study, so we cannot really do that. So we focus on just one form of capital, which is what we call bibliometric capital, which is the ensemble of bibliometric indicators available to an individual, a researcher or scientist. And so that's, for instance, the number of publication or H-index. That's a form of bibliometric capital. And the question then can be the following, is whether the number of publication and H-index associated with more emissions of CO2. And so what we did is try to compare H-index and number of publication with number of flights of individuals. So the results are here. This is the number of publications as a function of the number of flights in box plots. So if you look here, these people took 0 flights, and the median value for their number of publication is about 4. And when you go to people who fly the most, from 10 to 20, you see that these people who fly the most also have the largest number of publications. And you can check that this association is robust by doing statistical analysis, linear regression analysis. and it's very robust. We have a very small p-values for this linear regression. Also, when we include control variables such as gender, age, disciplines, etc., the dominant determinant of the number of publications of a scientist is the number of flights he takes. This is also true for the H index. We have the same relation. The statistical significance is a little bit lower, but it's still extremely high, and that the H index is associated strongly to the number of flights. It's not a causality. It's not because, sorry? 2 minutes. Thanks. Left. It's not because you fly more that it's not that you get into a plane that you write more papers. But clearly there is an association. And so a carbon footprint is really associated to the construction of this bibliometric capital. So, you know, there is this enhanced footprint, which results from an organization probably of the way we produce knowledge, which is connected to a form of competition in academia. And I think it's important to say that this is also, I mean, this enhanced footprint that is the result of this, probably this strong competition in academia is also something, you know, if we want to reduce the footprint, we can also reduce the competition, have more collaboration, etc. This will have effect on the footprint, but probably it will have effects on also on other aspects. This is the results of a survey conducted by Nathalie Webb in France, where she shows that postdocs feel a strong pressure, for instance, to work outside legal hours. So this is also a result of this competition. Here is the results of a study on gender discriminations that we published last year, which shows that female feel much more the fact that having children will be an obstacle to their careers than men. So this is also a result of this strong competition. So overall, perhaps there is a unique answer to all these issues of gender discrimination, pressure, and the publish and perish and the carbon footprint. And this is to really question these social conditions of the production of astronomical knowledge or scientific knowledge in general. Shouldn't we change the way we are doing science in a general way? I want to finish by just showing what we will be doing in this project in the coming years. We created what is called in France a groupement de recherche. It's a research project which is financially and logistically supported by 3 national institutions in France: CNRS, INRAE, and ADEME. And so we have we received a budget of over 300,000 euros for 2 years, and the expected duration is 5 years. It's led by a core team of scientists from many disciplines, including astronomy. And so Patrick Campbell is an astronomer in France, and he's really also deeply involved in this project. And we have a scientific council also with a number of scientists, also including from the IPCC. And what I want to say, maybe the take-home message for you, is that, of course, if you're in France, you can participate, but mainly that it is possible to have the support of public institutions to do research on these subjects. That you need to sort of start doing things yourself, and then the public institutions can follow. And that's it for now. And I want to thank all the people, and there are many that contributed to this project.